Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Dynamics 365 Tech Talk. Today's topic is WMS Troubleshooting Tips and Tricks. My name is Nina, and I'll be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this web conference through Teams live events, and the audio can be heard through your device speakers. Today's web conference is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. By participating in this session using Microsoft Teams, your name, email address, phone number, and/or title may be viewable by other session participants. If you do not consent to being a part of a recorded session, please disconnect at this time. The recording will be available on the Tech Talks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, please use the Q&A panel located on the right side of your screen. Our presenters will be responding to your questions throughout the event. Thank you for your patience during these announcements. Now let's get started. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Nicole Gump, Senior Program Manager, and Aaron Murch, Senior R&D Solution Architect. Nicole, over to you.
Thanks, Nina. Welcome to the WMS Troubleshooting Tech Talk, where we will be covering tips and tricks for troubleshooting common issues and errors that you may encounter while working with the warehouse management module within Dynamics 365 for supply chain management. Our agenda for the session will be to cover common issues and errors, and then to review the troubleshooting tips and tricks, along with the demos of those troubleshooting steps. So we will be going through all of these agenda items in 3 different sections. We have broken these out into inbound, inventory, and outbound, our 3 main functional areas within warehouse management. So let's get started. So our common issues and errors for inbound include: at the registration step, the user may run into an error where on the warehouse mobile device, the error states that the product identifier is not found. This means that the app does not recognize the product that was scanned by the user during the registration process. The next error they may encounter during the receiving process is that they cannot over-receive. So if the user is trying to enter a quantity that is greater than what is specified on the purchase order line, or greater than the quantity that's left to receive on the purchase order line, then they may receive this error on the app. For inbound loads, so if you're doing inbound load management and your vendor is sending ASNs or advanced shipment notifications to you, you may receive an error on the app while trying to receive that you cannot receive against that inbound ASN. Then when we look at the put away step, the user may encounter an error that states that the work is currently locked by a user and they're unable to perform the put away work. And then finally, for our inbound section, another common error that we see is if your users have the permission to override locations that are suggested on the work and they scan another location in the override workflow on the app, that they may run into an error that states the location type that they scanned is invalid. So these are 5 high-level, just common issues and errors, and by no means is this list meant to be all-encompassing or all-inclusive of every error that you may encounter. So please keep that in mind during the presentation. So our troubleshooting tips and tricks for these 5 inbound issues and errors include that error for registration, where it may say that the product identifier is not found. The resolution would be to first check that the barcode that you are trying to scan, the vendor's barcode, is in Dynamics 365 and that it is enabled for scanning. Otherwise, the warehouse mobile application will not recognize it. And again, keep in mind on the resolutions that we are listing here that by no means are these the only way to troubleshoot these errors, but simply the most common way or the best practice for troubleshooting. So if we move to receiving, our error would be that we cannot over-receive. So our user on the inbound dock is trying to enter a quantity for the PO line, and they're receiving the error that they cannot over-receive. So our resolution is that we want to verify that the quantity that they're entering falls within our over-delivery tolerance, or that we have an over-delivery tolerance on the PO line. For loads, if you're having an issue receiving against an inbound ASN, so again, this is only applicable if you're doing inbound load management and your vendor is sending or you are manually entering ASN information against the inbound load. But if you are doing that process and then you are trying to receive against that inbound load and having an issue, the resolution would be to check that the menu item that you're using for receiving is not explicitly blocked for ASN receiving, and that you are instead utilizing a license plate receiving menu item. For the put away process, if the material handler or user who is performing the put away from the inbound dock to the storage location receives an error when they scan the license plate or work ID that says that the work is locked by a user, then the resolution is to verify whether the work is already in process by another user. Perhaps somebody scanned it and walked away to acquire a piece of equipment to actually move it, or perhaps a supervisor or manager has actually specifically assigned that work to another user. And then finally, with the overrides, if they receive the error that says the location type is invalid when they're trying to override a put away location in this instance, then we would want to verify that the location that they're scanning meets our configuration of valid put type locations on the work class. And in this case, that would be for purchase order put away work. So I'm going to demo those inbound issues and their resolutions. So I'm going to switch my screen share to a Contoso environment. And I'm also going to be using the warehouse mobile application that is on my desktop and set up to interact with my demo environment here. So for the first set of inbound issues, the first one we discussed was registration and receiving the error of product identifier not being found. So I'm going to show you a purchase order that I've already got created in the system. So we're going to work with this order here. Ends in 204 in my environment. So I've got this line item on my purchase order. If I look at the line details below, I can actually view the barcode. In this case, I'm going to treat this like a vendor's barcode that's been loaded into my system. So this is what I'm going to use as a product identifier. So if I now take the role of a user who's working on the receiving dock in the warehouse, and I'm working in the warehouse mobile application, I'm going to go to my inbound menu, and I'm going to be doing a purchase receiving process. So the first thing I'm going to scan is the purchase order number. And then when it asks me to identify the item, this is where I want to scan the vendor's barcode. And here's where I'm receiving that error that says the product identifier is not found. So the resolution we discussed was to verify that the barcode is enabled for scanning. So I do see that we have our barcode loaded in the system, but I'm going to go check the detail of that item barcode setup. And on the general tab of the setup, I have several parameters here, and the one that we want to enable is for scanning. that allows the warehouse mobile application to recognize this barcode value. So I have enabled that for scanning and I have saved that setup. I should now be able to scan that again without leaving that workflow. And now the item is recognized. Okay, it's going to ask me how much I am receiving here. And our second error that we discussed was not being able to over-receive. So the user receives that cannot over-receive error message. So I'm going to go ahead here. I see that there's 100 pieces on my purchase order line. I'm going to try to receive 110 pieces. So this is over the amount on my purchase order line. And there's my error that says I cannot over-receive. So our resolution here was to verify, again, down on the line details in our delivery tab this time, we find our over and under delivery tolerances. Here I see that I currently have no over delivery tolerance, and I'm trying to receive 10% over the quantity on the line. So I would need to update this, or in the real world business scenario, someone with the ability to edit purchase orders would need to update this over delivery tolerance to be at least the amount that I'm trying to over receive. And once I save that, I should now be able to over receive my quantity. So instead of receiving an error, I now get the work completed message, which is really a work created message to tell me I have purchase order put away work now for 110 pieces. So I was now able to over receive by setting that over delivery tolerance. Okay, the next issue that we discussed was not being able to receive against an inbound ASN. So I've got another purchase order out here. It is for the same item, but from a different vendor. So if we say that this vendor sends us ASNs for our inbound loads, I can see the load that's created directly from my purchase order line. Again, on the line details under loads, I can jump straight to the inbound load, and under the packing structure, I would find the ASN information that the vendor has sent us. So I know that this is the license plate that these 100 pieces should be coming in on based on this ASN information or advanced shipment notice information. So the issue that you may encounter as a purchase receiving worker on the dock is that if you are in the purchase receiving menu, and this time I'm going to enter my other PO number. And again, I'm going to scan the item. I could use that barcode now that I've enabled it to identify my item again. And this one again has 100 pieces. I'm not going to bring in all of them. But when I go to verify my item in my quantity, this time I'm receiving an issue that says the line must be received through license plate receiving. So the resolution we discussed was to verify that the menu item that we're using is not blocked for receiving ASNs, and rather to use a license plate receiving menu item if it is. So I want to show within the warehouse management setup for the mobile device menu item that I am using for purchase receiving, that I do have this block receiving with ASN item information parameter set to yes. So that is why I received the error message, and that is a hard stop on that purchase receiving option. So I can follow the instructions in the error message and instead use a license plate receiving menu item. So I cancel out of here, and I have an ASN receiving item that, if I look in my setup, is set up for license plate receiving. So this should now allow me to scan the license plate on the ASN. So this should be labeled by the vendor who is sending you this. And now I can see, okay, that license plate is coming from this vendor on this purchase order number, this item and quantity, and I can complete my receiving process. So it has told me work completed. And again, that would mean work has been created for put away. Okay, so that is the first 3 of our inbound errors and then resolutions. So let's move on to the 4th one, which was for put away. So the issue might be that you have work that is locked by a user. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to act as if I'm a material handler and I am again on my warehouse mobile application. And this time I'm going to be in the purchase put away option. And I'm going to scan a license plate ID. So during the registration and receiving process, most likely if the vendor has not labeled the license plate for you with that ASN information, then you may be printing your own label or have a pre-printed label with a barcode that can be scanned to initiate this put away process. So I'm going to scan a license plate that is sitting on the receiving dock ready for put away in my warehouse. And it's going to tell me, oh, let me grab, that may not have been the right one. Let me make sure I've got the right one. So I've got an open purchase order put away here, and I'm just scanning. I want just the license plate ID. There we go. So the error message says that the current work is locked. And I see that back here in my open work screen, that this is indeed locked by user N2, which is not my user ID that I am logged into the mobile application with. So the resolution would be, if a warehouse supervisor or manager has explicitly assigned this to this user, we could either have them change the user to my user or just go ahead and remove the lock on the user. And that way any user can go ahead and pick up that purchase order put away work and complete it. So now that I've kind of released that work from that particular user, my user can scan it and I can go ahead and complete this pick. The Contoso data is set up for grouping on the purchase order putaways, which allows the material handler to pick up multiple license plates off the receiving dock for efficiency. I'm only going to pick up this one, so I'm going to tell it that I'm done. I'm not going to group anything else, and it's going to direct me to the put away. I'm actually going to use this for our last issue in the troubleshooting, which was that if we do an override, the user might encounter an error that says the location type for the location they are trying to override to is invalid. So let's try to do an override. And the user is only going to see the override location option in their dropdown if their user is actually enabled to do overrides for putaways. So that's kind of the first criteria, is that you have to be enabled. But if you are and you enter that override workflow, you can pick any of these work exception codes. This would be kind of like a reason code that could be evaluated later if needed. But I'm just going to say it's a location override, and then it's asking me to scan a location. So instead of taking it to the floor 001 location that the work decided on, I'm going to enter in a different location. Maybe I've got a bulk location, and it's telling me that that location type is invalid. So the reason it's doing it is because in our setup, this time for our work, if we look at the work class, which is used on our work templates, and if you're curious about a lot of these warehouse management configurations, I will be doing another tech talk that is a deep dive just on the configuration forms. So please look for that and join us if you've got specific questions around configuration. But for this one, the work class configuration does have a valid put location type that we have explicitly set to floor. So we are saying for purchase order putaways, they can only go to floor locations. So I scanned a bulk location when I was trying to override, and that is why I'm not able to do it and I'm receiving the error message. So if I instead enter in a floor location, it is now allowing me to do the override. because I have used the right location type. All right. So that is it for our inbound section. Let me reshare and move into our inventory section. So here are some common issues and errors you may encounter when working within kind of the inventory management space. So once product is in your warehouse, these are some of the activities you may be doing from an inventory management perspective. So regarding cycle counting, if you are running cycle count plans, so these are the regular recurring plans where you might be doing counts, weekly or monthly or quarterly. If you are trying to configure those plans to do partial location counts, meaning by item for multiple item locations, and you're running into an issue where your cycle count plan is generating work perhaps, but not by item, it's generating work for the entire location, and that's not the desired output, then you may be running into that issue, and we'll discuss how to troubleshoot that. And also related to cycle counting, once you are performing a cycle count and the user has entered their count, if there's a discrepancy, there should be a review process afterwards. And if you're not seeing the pending review work being generated, then that is another issue you may encounter. When it comes to replenishment, you may also have a work generation error. So meaning if you do a replenishment periodic task or a batch job where we have, say, a min-max replenishment set up for our forward picking locations in the warehouse, and you run that batch job and then it is not generating any replenishment work, we will talk about how to troubleshoot that. And then for movements, so this is just location to location or bin to bin movement within the warehouse. The user may have an issue of not being able to move the full quantity that's on a license plate or in a location. And then finally, with the license plates themselves, when trying to scan them into the warehouse mobile app, the user might receive an error message that says that that location or license plate is not valid. So let's discuss some of the troubleshooting tips and tricks for those inventory issues. So the first one we discussed was the cycle count plan. If you're trying to create those plans by item to count just a part of a multiple item location. So I might have items A, B, and C in location 1, 2, 3, and I only want to count item B instead of all of the location. So if you are encountering that issue where the system is not generating your cycle count work by item for those locations, then you want to verify a couple of things. One, that you have set up the work line break by item on your work template, and then also that that template is explicitly associated to your cycle count plan that you are running. For the cycle count review, if you're not getting the pending review work being created, so there's no review process happening after a user does a cycle count on the mobile app, then the resolution is to verify that that user is not set up to be a cycle count supervisor on their worker setup. For replenishments, if we have a work not created issue for the replenishment job that's running, then most commonly the issue is that there's not sufficient quantity available in the picking or from location to actually replenish whatever empty or insufficient quantity is in the to location. For movements, if the user is having trouble scanning a license plate or an item and they cannot move the full quantity that's physically on the license plate, then you want to make sure that that quantity isn't reserved by some other transaction, or even if it is, that the user is set up to be able to be allowed to move that inventory if it has open work. And then finally, for the license plates, if on the warehouse mobile application, and this may be in any number of different workflows, that you would scan either a location or an LP to initiate the workflow, and you receive an error message that says it's not valid, then the resolution is in the past to verify that you do not have a license plate and a location named identically the same. And I have put in parentheses here that that issue was actually fixed relatively recently in 10.0.11. So if this is something you have encountered in the past, there is actually a fix for this now. So I wanted to call it out just because it's very common. We have seen this in a lot of implementations in the past. So let's demo those inventory issues and their resolutions. So I'm going to bring back up my environment. And the first one was about the cycle count plans. So within warehouse management, under cycle counting, I'm going to go to my cycle count plans. I'm going to be using this one here that's set up for daily count, and it's just set up for a max of 10 counts to generate. And if I process this cycle count plan, I'm not going to run it in batch. It should not take too long. It's going to tell me that it completed and it has created some work. But if I go look at my queue of open work, I see that these cycle count, let me filter for clarity, that these cycle count work items that were created are for a location, but not for a particular item. So if I have got multiple items in this location and I only want to count a part of the location or one particular item, then this is not the cycle count work that I want to use. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel that cycle count work because it is not correct. And we're going to go back to the cycle count plan, and our resolution that we mentioned was to verify our work template is associated to our plan. So I'm going to select my work template here. And then I'm also going to show that work template, the other resolution is to verify that the work line break on that cycle counting work template is set up to group by the item. So that will give us our break by item, and having it specified on the plan, make sure that that work template is being utilized when this process is run. So if we rerun the process, we're going to go back to our open work queue again. And again, I will filter for you. And now we should see that the cycle count work is being generated by item. So now instead of just having a count by floor 001, I've got a count by item within that location. So you can see as I click through here, even if it's a single SKU in the location, I have got the item number specified. So that helps me do partial location counts. All right, I am going to jump to the mobile app to show the next process, which would be the cycle count pending review. So I was in an inbound process. I'm going to back up in my menu and switch to inventory. And I'm going to do a spot count, just an ad hoc count in my warehouse. And I am going to enter in, let's see, I've got a location. I believe I know the item in here, and it's going to ask me to count this. So I'm going to do a little bit of cheating here, and I'm going to go look at exactly what quantity is in this location, because I want to make sure that I'm counting a discrepancy so that we can see the process. So this has 196 pieces on hand. So I'm going to count maybe 195. And I'm going to get that error that says that the count is different that I entered from what the system expects. That's right, and it's going to give me an option to retry that count. That's configurable. And then it's always going to ask me at the end of my count, is there anything else I want to add to this location? For the purpose of this demo, no, I do not. So I'm just going to verify. And it's going to tell me that the work is completed. If I refresh my on-hand inventory, I see that this automatically adjusted my inventory down to the 195 that I counted with no review process. So typically the users who are working on the mobile application in the warehouse, we do not want adjustments to just automatically happen to our inventory with no review. So we want to make sure, our tip is to make sure that our worker that is set up. So I will go look at my worker. I can see that I am set up as a cycle count supervisor. So I need to disable that permission to make sure that any discrepancy that I have when I'm doing cycle counts, and whether they were ad hoc counts or counts that were planned and generated previously that I'm just executing on the mobile app, that anytime I have a discrepancy, that it will be reviewed. So let's go ahead and make sure that that resolved our issue. So if I again count that location and that item, I know that it just adjusted down to 195 pieces. So maybe now I count 197. Again, it's going to tell me that does not match, but I'm going to enter the same count. I'm not going to add anything else. And this time, if I look at my open work queue, because I'm not a supervisor any longer, there is now a pending review cycle count work, and my inventory has not yet been adjusted until this pending review work is completed. If you want to see the full process of the cycle count review, we did cover that in the introduction to warehouse management tech talk a couple of weeks ago. So I believe you can go back and view that recording on demand. So the next inventory error that we talked about was replenishment. So for replenishment, this is similar to cycle counting, where it is a batch job that is run. At least in the case of this demo, I'm not going to do any wave demand or load demand. We're just going to do a min-max in a batch job. I'm going to run this. In my demo data, there is a specific item with an empty fixed location or forward picking location that is trying to be replenished. And I can see that when my batch job runs, it's telling me that no work is created. So it's telling me, so that location, the forward picking location for my item that it's trying to replenish could not be, because it could not create work. So let's go look at why that might be happening. So I'm going to look at the item, which is this A002 that we saw in the message, and I'm going to look at my on-hand inventory. So our resolution was to verify that we have got sufficient inventory in the from location or the pick location for the replenishment. So here's my empty fixed location, and it has to be picked from the floor according to my replenishment location directive in this demo data. And I see I do have some inventory there, but it's not sufficient. I've got 95 units, and I've got a minimum of 50 units and a maximum of 100 units on my replenishment template for min-max. So it's trying to replenish this empty location back up to the 100 units, and I've only got 95. So for the sake of this demo here, I'm going to adjust some inventory into my picking location so that I do have sufficient inventory available. And then I'm going to make sure that my replenishment can run after that. So let's retry that replenishment batch job for min-max. And let's see if we get replenishment work this time. Okay, so this time it's telling me that one work header was created. And let me clear those old messages. So now if I look at my open work queue, I do have replenishment work for the full 100 pieces to replenish from 0 because it was empty up to the maximum of 100 based on my min-max replenishment template. Okay, so once I had sufficient inventory, I was able to create replenishment work. Now let's look at the movement. So the issue being that I couldn't move the full quantity that's on my license plate. So I am going to go back to my application, and I am going to cancel out of the counting option I was doing earlier. I'm going to stay in the inventory menu, but I'm going to do a movement this time. I'm going to scan in a license plate that is just sitting in my warehouse. And maybe I want to move this because I'm trying to consolidate some inventory in locations within my warehouse. So let's see. So if I try to enter in the quantity on the license plate to move it and verify it, it's telling me that the quantity is not valid. So the first resolution was to verify the quantity is not reserved. And if I look at my work, I do know that license plate is reserved. It has open work. So in order, and I can show that as well. If I look at the license plate. So here is my license plate. So this is reserved. It's actually the license plate that's going to be picked for that replenishment work that we just used. So that A002 from that floor 2 location that's supposed to be replenished, but the replenishment work has not been done. So I've got open work for this license plate. So what I need to check then is that my user, so let me go back to my user setup. If I want to enable my users to still move this work, even though there's, or move the inventory, sorry, even though there's open work, then we have to enable this parameter for the user that says allow movement of inventory with associated work. So if I enable that permission for my user, I should now be able to go back to my device, and I'm not going to leave this workflow. I'm again just going to enter the quantity on my license plate that I'm trying to move. And this time you'll see that I get past the error message and it is allowing me to pick up that license plate and move it. I'm just going to move it to another floor location. I'm going to retain that same license plate. I'm moving the entire thing. And what you'll actually see if we go back to the open work queue, that replenishment work has now been updated based on the fact that I moved the inventory. So that license plate was going to be picked from floor 002, and now it's being picked from floor 005 because I just moved the inventory. So this is what's happening when you enable that parameter for the user. Okay, and then finally on our inventory issues, we have the license plate error. So this is the one, and even this movement is a good example where to initiate this workflow, you have the ability to scan a location or a license plate. So in the past, the issue being that we would have a location within our warehouse, and I'm going to show you the one I'm going to use this value of 24 because I know that it is a location in my warehouse. But if I go look at the license plate master table, I see that I've also got a license plate 24. So in the past, before the fix in 10.0.11, if I were to enter that 24 value on my app, I would receive an error stating that it's not valid because the app could not determine whether the value I entered was a location or a license plate, because it's exactly the same in both tables. Now you will see when I scan that, however, with the fix in place, that it recognizes it's first scanning through the location, the license plate table, and it's recognizing, okay, license plate 24 is sitting in this location, and then it would allow me to proceed here. Okay, I'm going to cancel out because I just wanted to show that that has been resolved. So that is all for the inventory tips and tricks. So let's move back to the presentation and move to our final section, which is outbound. So the common issues and errors you may encounter in some of your outbound processes in warehouse management are first at the release to warehouse process. You may not be getting any work created at all. If you do get work created from that process, you may receive an error that says that the item allocation failed. So meaning that the system could not determine where to retrieve or pick that inventory from within your warehouse. Then once you are in the picking process on the warehouse mobile application, if you go to a picking location and there is not enough physical inventory in the location to fulfill what the picking work is specifying, then you may need to do a short pick. Within the short pick workflow, there is a process to reallocate the inventory kind of on demand. So if I pick 7 out of 10 and I have 3 remaining, I have the option to reallocate the 3 remaining so that I do not short or partial ship in order to my customer. But if the user is not being prompted for that reallocation, then that is an issue you might encounter. Once we have completed picking and our inventory is staged for shipping, you may need to unpick or reverse that pick based on, a customer may call and say that they want to cancel their order, or maybe they just need to decrease the quantity on the order, and so you need to reverse part or all of the pick. And then finally, for the outbound loads, if you have an issue with ship confirming, where the system does not allow you to ship confirm, and this would be at the very end of the process after everything has shipped and left the building, and you're trying to update the load status in the system, and the user might be receiving an error message that says they cannot complete that ship confirmation. So let's talk about the troubleshooting tips and tricks for those 5 outbound issues. So on release to warehouse, if you're encountering the error where no work is being created, then a couple of things. We want to verify that the inventory is available in the warehouse and that it is physically reserved, or that you have a setup to reserve it through a batch process. But the reservation is the critical component there. And then when we talk about work, if it is creating work, but it's failing to allocate the item, then you want to verify that the quantity that's available is in the correct location or zone, whatever you have specified on your picking directive in the location directive setup. For short picking, if the user is in a short pick workflow within the picking process on the warehouse mobile app, and they are not being prompted to reallocate the short quantity, then a couple of things to check here. We want to verify that the work exception is actually configured to allow that reallocation to happen, and that also the user has the permission to do the reallocation. If we need to unpick either the full quantity or partial quantity from something that's already been picked and staged for shipping, then we want to do that from our load, and we do that through the reduce pick quantity form on our load line. So we'll see that in the demo. And then finally, for the load, once we're at the very end of the process, if we run into an issue with ship confirmation, then we want to verify a few things, that our load quantities are fully picked to our final shipping location, and that final shipping location is known by the system based on what you specify in the warehouse management parameters. So everything needs to be in that location, not another outbound location, such as still in a packing station or some other outbound staging location. So we want to make sure that that load is in a loaded status, and that if it is short, that you have to specify an under delivery tolerance on the load line to be able to confirm it without the full quantity. All right, so let's move into our last set of demos. So for the release to warehouse, if we have an error where no work is created, let's look at, I've got a sales order that is already in the system. So I see here that I've got a sales order to my customer. I've got a couple of different items on here. If I try to release this sales order, I'm going to get an error that says no work was created. So our resolution is to verify that we've got inventory and that it's physically reserved. So first of all, do I have inventory on hand? Yes, I do. It looks like I've got sufficient inventory to fulfill this order. So the next thing I want to do is make sure it's reserved. And in the Kintoso data, there is a manual reservation policy. So it is not automatically trying to reserve inventory for me when I create the sales order line. So I need to do this process either manually or set up a release to warehouse batch job to reserve the inventory upon release. Because I'm demoing the process manually, I'm just going to go ahead and go to the inventory reservation form from my sales order line and make sure that I reserve the quantity here. So now I'm going to go ahead. There was a shipment that was created, even though there was no work that was created. There are ways to take this and continue to process it or try to reprocess it. But I'm going to go ahead and delete this shipment because I know there's no associated work, and I'm going to kind of start from scratch here. And I'm going to try to release this again now that I have got a reservation for my sales order line. Okay, so now I've got an issue where the inventory is available and it was reserved, but our second issue is that we have an item allocation error. So in order to resolve that, we want to make sure that our quantity is available in our picking location. So for our A002 item, if you remember from earlier, that is actually the item that we were using in our replenishment scenario. So our picking location was empty. We created replenishment work for it, but I did not execute or complete the replenishment work, which I'll do now. But until I do this, it was not available in the picking location, and that is why my allocation failed. I'm gonna go ahead and complete it here from the system for the replenishment work. That is going to close the replenishment work and make this inventory of 100 pieces available in my picking location. So now I'm going to try one more time. My replenishment work is complete. I'm going to go back to my sales order. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing that it created a shipment, but the work that it created was not allocated correctly. So I'm just going to delete this open shipment and start over with a clean slate to release one more time. And now I do not get any error messages, and it tells me work has been created. And if I go ahead and look at that work, it's going to show me that it has now able to pick that inventory from that picking location that I just replenished. All right, so let's use this because our next issue was on short picking. So I'm going to back out on my app from that inventory menu we were working in the previous section and go to Outbound. And I'm going to go to sales picking. So here I'm going to take the work ID and I'm going to scan it into my sales picking option. And it's telling me for this item to pick 6 pieces from this location. So say as the user, I'm in the warehouse, I'm on my app, I go to this location to get 6 pieces, but there's not 6 pieces sitting in this location. So I'm going to initiate a short pick, and I'm going to say that I've only got 5 pieces because that's all I found. So it's telling me that it's short 1 piece. I'm going to verify that, and it's going to tell me, okay, take the 5 pieces you do have to the bay door, which is our final shipping location. So you'll notice it allowed me to short pick, but it never prompted me to reallocate that 1 piece. So if I had another piece of that item sitting in another location in the warehouse that I'm able to pick from, I would want to complete that order versus having a short pick and now a partial shipment for my customer. That would be a bad just customer experience. So we're going to go back and look at the resolution for that is a couple of things to verify. One, that our work exception setup for short picking allows for reallocation. So if I look at, and I will filter for clarity. So this is our short picking work exception that we're using in our workflow. It is set up for reallocation, manual reallocation. So the other troubleshooting tip is that we want to make sure that the user, so again, back to my user setup, if I want them to be able to reallocate, I need to give them that permission again. So this is the allow manual item reallocation parameter. So if I enable my user to do that reallocation, then I should be prompted the next time that I short pick to reallocate the inventory if it is available somewhere else in the warehouse. So I'm going to go back to the sales order we were working with. There is another line item on here so that I can show you this. Let's make sure we've got an inventory reservation. I'm going to physically reserve that. And then I'm going to release. We should have more picking work now. Wait, I don't see that. Let me go back to my work. Okay. I can use this one to show you. So for sales picking, my user is now enabled to do a short pick. So this is this item for 10 pieces. But again, if I do not have 10 pieces once I arrive at this floor 001 location, then I want to do a short pick. It's going to tell me, you know, which license plate are you. This location, unlike the other one I was picking from, is license plate controlled, which is why it's asking me to scan the license plate that I am picking from. So if I enter that license plate value, I enter the one that we looked at earlier, which was 24 to demo that other license plate issue. So it's asking me again, I had 10 pieces, but I'm short picking. So if I have 7, now you'll see that I have enabled my user to be able to do a manual reallocation. So now I am presented with all of the other locations and quantities that are available for that item to reallocate the 3 pieces. So I could choose, you know, if I'm already in floor 001, it would probably be smart of me to maybe pick them from floor 002 because I'm right next to that location and I don't have to travel very far. So I can say floor 002. It's assigning a temporary license plate to me because the license plate that I picked from, I'm not taking the full quantity. So I'm going to go ahead and accept that. And now it's asking me, I want to show you that what has happened to our work ID is that it updated the pick from the original location to the 7 that was short. And it has now added a pick line to our work record that shows the reallocation of the 3 from another location. I'm actually going to go look up what's on hand in this location because I do not have memorized the license plates to pick from. I'm just going to pick one that's available here. It's for my 3 pieces. And now it's asking me to put the total of 10 to the bay door. So instead of short picking this customer's order to 7 pieces, I'm able to fulfill the entire 10 pieces by just having the system present me with the other locations in the warehouse that I can pick the remaining product from. So this is a much better customer experience. All right, so the last 2 issues that we have are around the unpicking. So if we need to unpick an order, I'm just going to go ahead and use that order I was just working with. And I'm going to go to the load. So if I go look at my outbound load, so say for some reason that customer calls and they no longer need the 10 pieces, maybe they only needed 6 pieces. So I would go to my load, and in this reduce pick quantity form, I will see all of the picks that I did that total the 10 pieces, and I can unpick whatever amount I need to. So say I'm going to unpick 4 of these, and I'm going to move them back. I had picked these, maybe I want to take them back to the picking location directly that they came from. And I'm going to even move it right back to the license plate it came off of. That's only applicable, again, if your location that you're moving it to is license plate controlled. And if I choose to reduce the load line quantity, that's going to go ahead and save me a step of having to update the load line quantity myself, which kind of will lead us into our next issue we're going to talk about. But if I confirm this and I update here, you'll see that I now only have 6 pieces on my load line, and my work created quantity was updated to 6 pieces. So I have moved those 4 pieces that I unpicked back to the picking location of floor 001, and I'm left with only 6 pieces that this customer called and said that this is what they wanted. I'm still in a loaded status because I reduced my load line quantity to match what is left, and I could go ahead and confirm this outbound shipment. So I have no issues here after the unpicking. But the last issue that we want to talk about is if you do have a confirmation error. So let's go look at the other sales order we were working with when we did a short pick. So here's our other sales order. Let's look at the line that we did short pick. So I'm going to go to this load. So we had 6 pieces, but only 5 pieces were picked because this is the one that we did the short pick without the reallocation. So if I were going to try to confirm this shipment right now, I'm going to get an error. So part of the issue is not everything is in the final shipping location. The way that this reads right now is that the system is still expecting me to ship 6 pieces on this load. So I would either have to go re-release the 1 remaining and pick it separately and add it to this load line to get up to 6. But if this truly was a short pick and I didn't have the 1 remaining, I would either have to update my load line quantity or allow an under delivery percentage here to allow me to do the outbound shipment. So I could make this 5 pieces to match what was actually picked. And then I could do a confirmation. I'm actually going to I'm going to remove this load line from this particular load because we did not pick that or ship that on this particular load. So you'll see when I updated the quantity to match what was short picked, I was then able to confirm the outbound shipment. So that is it for our demos. I know we're right up about 1 minute left. Aaron, is there any questions that came up in the Q&A that you want me to address?
Maybe just one. I've had a few different questions around barcode setup. I know it's one of the first things we talked about. So do you maybe want to just address, is barcode setup required for an item, or could you just scan the item number? And then also, how is that used throughout the system if it is required?
Yeah, so good question. Yes, the barcode setup in Dynamics 365 needs to be done, right? So if a vendor ships you, say, a new product, or they have a new barcode on a product, even that is existing in your system, you will need to set that up. Because if you try to scan that value in Dynamics 365, supply chain management is not aware of it, then there's no way for the application, the warehouse mobile application, to recognize it. So yes, you do need to make sure that the barcode setup is complete. So let me go to make sure that this comes up. So here's our just kind of master barcode table. It does live under the retail and commerce module if you're looking for the setup. But yes, you would have to either preload or use a data entity to load the barcodes here. So the barcode values before you would then enable them for scanning. So what we demoed was just that they, perhaps somebody had done a data migration and they put all the vendor barcodes in, but they forgot to flip this flag. That's kind of the process that we showed. But yes, this is a prerequisite that this information is in the system. If I just tried to scan a barcode that was not even listed here, the app is not going to recognize that.
Great, thanks, Nicole. Yeah, there's a few other ones that we can address after the fact, but I think in terms of the presentation, I think we're good. Thank you. Thanks,
Aaron. All right, so we can address some of those other questions in the chat. But otherwise, here's my contact information. Feel free to connect with me if there's any follow-up questions. And otherwise, thank you for your time. I will hand it back to Nina.
Thank you, Nicole. Yep, so we would like to get your feedback on today's session. I've posted a link to a short survey in the Q&A panel. We value your feedback and welcome your input on how we did today and what you would like to see in future sessions. The survey scores are on a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest score possible. Thank you for your participation. As a reminder, the recording of today's session will be available on the TechTalks Community Dynamics page within 5 business days. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters and a thank you to our audience for logging in and joining us today. Please stay safe and have a great rest of your day or evening wherever you are.